Right, Charlie, what's tip number 2, please?
Tip number 2. I feel like we've focused so long on tip number 1 there. I'll dive into tip number 2. Tip number 2. Oh yeah, so this is a really important one. It is enjoy the kids' company. And what I mean by that is the warmth side of teaching. You know, people I'm sure would have heard about warm, strict, and the kind of the first thing I'm talking about there, I guess, is the strict. You know, it's that fundamental layer of authority you need to have in a school building, in that the kids will follow the school rules. Now, once you get that, it's so important that you have the warmth on top of it. Otherwise, the kids, you know, they'll just be marching around the kind of prison camp, and they're not going to be enjoying themselves, and they will not be working hard for you, and everyone's going to be having just a worse time, you know. So this is something I really missed in the beginning of my teaching career. I thought, if only I had the systems they have at Michaela, if only I had detentions, if only I had centralised detentions, then I could just sit back and relax, and the lessons would just sort of happen for me, and I could just walk in and in a really wooden way deliver lessons, and they would just go well. Now, I'm so sorry to break anyone's heart who thought the same thing as me, any me's out there right now. Unfortunately, no, not unfortunately, fortunately, I've come to realise it is the case that we also need to show the kids we love them. And this is actually such a wonderful discovery for me in my teaching, because it's made me enjoy my lessons and my teaching career so much more, being able to have a laugh with the kids, being able to show them that you're on their side, like connecting with them as other human beings, having a relationship with them. I used to think, and I'm ashamed to say this now, I'm ashamed to admit this, but I used to think that relationships was a bit of a dirty word around school. I used to think that people who leaned on their relationships with kids in order to get them to do things were undermining everyone else, because everyone else was following the systems and they were in some way undermining everyone else. Now, there are subtleties and complications to that we can get into, but it's so important that I say here, and so that all the me's out there can hear, that you must show the kids you love them, you must build a connection with them, you must have a laugh with them, you must enjoy their company, because they'll enjoy your lessons so much more. Your classroom and the school will feel like a warmer, more joyous place. And in the end, then this is the utilitarian side of it, and in the end the kids will work harder and will get better grades, and it'll be better for them.
Again, this is fascinating, this, Charlie. You mentioned warm, strict. That's one of the things that people often latch on to and think, well, that just sounds absolutely ridiculous, it's a contradiction, and so on and so forth. So I'm interested in diving into the practicalities of this, because tip 1, obviously you've outlined the rules that exist within the lessons and so on and so forth, and that can definitely kind of fit into the kind of strict camp there. So how do you get the warmth in lessons? Do the rules sometimes get in the way of this warmth, or are the rules there to support the warmth, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, this is the amazing thing about it. The rules actually really enable the warmth, because I think it's only when you have that foundation of kind of authority in the room and control of the space, and the feeling that the kids are all safe and can trust you and trust that the room is going to be a safe place in which to exist. Then on top of that layer of security and kind of trust and calm, you can build on top of that all the relationship building stuff. So when you've got a room of kids who are just sat politely looking towards you, waiting for you to teach the lesson, that's the moment at which you can be a bit silly, and you can kind of make a couple of jokes, or tease one of the pupils in a fun way, or kind of sing happy birthday to a pupil, or put silly glasses on a pupil, or all of the silly fun things that we do on top of just normal teaching to show the kids we love them. Those all happen on top of a bedrock of authority and of understanding that we all follow the rules. Now, what happens is the kids, if you're being silly in front of them and having a laugh with them, they will be laughing along with you, safe in the knowledge that it's not going to get out of control, and people aren't going to start standing up and throwing things and shouting out and doing all that stuff. Because at the end of the day, we will always follow through with the rules. If we start to be silly and loving and warm, and the pupils, because they're real human beings, and this will happen, and they maybe take it too far, they take the joke too far, they start doing something silly, well then we roll it back and we say, actually, no, the rules are the rules, and of course we'll give out demerits and so on to rein the kids back in a little bit if they start to get out of control. But that's not to say that you're afraid to, in the first instance, let the reins go just a little bit so that the pupils are enjoying their time in the lesson.
Got it. It sounds tricky to get right, Charlie. Again, I can only speak from my experience here, but this kind of giving them the freedom to, like, you can imagine you come in, you're cracking a few jokes, being a bit silly, so then the kids join in, and all of a sudden it's kind of bubbling up a bit, and then you're in kind of a bit of a tricky position, because it's almost like you've started this process off, with the silliness, and then you've got to say, all right, okay, now it's time to stop, and the kids might be thinking, well, you started it, so now we're just trying to join in, and so on. Is it quite tricky sometimes to kind of get this balance? Is it just something that comes with experience?
No, it's certainly tricky, and it is certainly something that comes with experience. I say teachers, when they first join the school, do really struggle to find that balance, because people, I think, when they first come, are a little bit on the side of being stricter, actually, and in holding the reins tight and not letting the kids go, even for an inch. Now, I would say that is not necessarily a bad strategy, because it is better, I would say, to err on the side of being in control and purposeful, and the lesson going in a productive academic direction, rather than just being silly and having a laugh and everything unraveling. So I'll caution with that. And I would say that one way of actually showing the kids that you love them and showing them warmth is actually to do the lesson itself, as in the content. For me, it would be maths that I'm teaching, in a way that shows that you love your subject, and that you love when the kids get it right, and that you're so happy when they give you the right answer, and you're really enjoying the maths lesson, you're enjoying your time with them. So to be clear, the warmth that you're showing doesn't just have to be you being silly and making jokes. That's part of it, and putting glasses on them and so on, and putting wigs on them. That's part of it, and particularly for the younger kids, that's a fun thing that I think should exist in education. But you can show them that warmth in a more purposeful way.
Got it, Charlie. This question might be a rubbish question, so feel free to disregard this. And it's probably the most obvious question as well. It feels to me that the kind of warmth, or the silliness, I don't know what the right word is, but it's kind of one way. It's one way. Kind of the teacher makes the decision that now's the time, we're going to kind of be a bit off task or less focused. Now feels like the appropriate time where we're going to be a bit silly and talk and so on. I'm just wondering, is there room for the kind of spontaneity where the kids will, maybe it's the time that they should be quiet, but now actually one of the kids has spotted something funny, so they're going to say it, or it's someone's birthday and you don't know about it and one of the kids tells you, or just those kind of magical spontaneous moments. I guess the cliched view of Michaela will be that they simply can't happen, because the kids know that, for example, when you're modelling, you've already said they can't talk over you and so on and so forth. So I just wonder, is it very much kind of one way, this warmth, or is there room for that kind of spontaneity the other way? I don't know if that makes sense at all.
That does make sense. No, it's a good question. I think the thing with this is that what you're trying to build up with the kids is a sense of, and this is what we want, I think, out of all people, out of all adults, and at the end of the day, what we're trying to do for these kids is to raise them up to be, sensible, functioning human adults. You want to try and build up with the kids a sense over time of when is it appropriate to make a joke, and what is an appropriate joke, and so yes, of course you can feed off the kids there, in that if they raise that it's so and so's birthday or something and you didn't realise, and they're starting the joke, then that is fine, of course, at the right moment. If you're in the middle of explaining simultaneous equations, then you don't want the kids to be interrupting you to tell you something silly, of course. And if that were to happen, we would say, no, now's not the time, kind of thing. But then again, if there's an appropriate moment, maybe it's form time where it's just a little more relaxed and you've just taken the register, and there is that moment of kind of slightly freer time, and the kids raise something that is funny, or maybe they come to speak to you in the playground to say something along those lines, then of course you're inviting it, and then you can riff off it and you can play with it. And I think you, as a teacher, need to be confident to lead the mood of the room and the culture of the room, and if you feel like the appropriate mood of the room in that moment is that you can be a bit warmer and just take your foot off the gas a little bit in terms of being really strict with the kids all the time and getting them to do loads of maths, then you need to be a judge of that, and you need to trust your own judgment of that. So if you feel that the kids are taking it too far or raising a joke at the wrong moment, then be the authority in the room and say you need to dictate the culture of that space, and the kids should be able to read from your body language, what you're saying, the moment of the lesson, whether it's an appropriate moment for that kind of behaviour.
Got it. Fantastic. Final question on this one, Charlie. You've alluded to it a little bit. How does the warmth play out and showing the kids you love them outside of lessons? What kind of things do you do on kind of break duty, form time and so on to foster this?
Yeah, good question. I mean, this is actually a huge space where you can foster that warmth, because, of course, in lessons, a lot of the time you will want to be purposeful. Yeah. And if you can kind of weave in jokes into your maths teaching in a way that, you feel is both productive and getting that relationship, then brilliant. But that's obviously high-level teaching. Yes. I would say that if you can't do that in the beginning and actually all the time, do try and catch the kids in the break spaces. For us, there's obviously break time and then there's lunchtime. I imagine it's the same in most schools. At lunchtime, we have basketball happening. We have table tennis happening. I'll often just hop on, to the table tennis or grab a basketball and just, try and aim at the hoop. Have a bit of banter with the kids about scoring, not scoring, whatever happens. Just kind of riff off that a little bit. So yeah, it's a really great time when you're in that slightly more relaxed space to take advantage of that and to show them your human side and to show them that you care about them and you want to enjoy their company, which was what I started with on this tip. Obviously, there's also more sort of functional things, like we write postcards for kids who we think are doing particularly well. So, in terms of systematizing your warmth, you can think about ways, stickers, stamps, postcards, even marking books it wouldn't be books in maths from our point of view, but if you're a subject where you mark books or mark essays or mark tests or whatever it is, that you do that in a way, that you put a little smiley face on their paper. That's just one more way to show that you love them, and that's what I'm trying to get at here.
That's fantastic. Charlie, just before we move on to tip 3, I can't let that little thing you've said there, that if in maths we obviously don't mark books. If you're not going to come to marking a little bit later on, will you just tell us just very quickly what do you mark in maths? Because I know maths teachers out there will be like, what is he going on about there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we might get derailed here for a good hour, I feel, Craig, but I'll go into it slightly. You might, I can't remember, I did listen to yours and Danny's a very long chat you had a number of years ago now, and I think Danny might have spoken about this a little bit, but I'll just kind of summarise it for those of the listeners that haven't heard this before. So the main thing we mark each week is we mark a quiz that the pupils do in lessons. Now, the kind of cycle of that, and I'll summarise it very, very quickly because we could go into loads of detail, is sure. The pupils do a written homework on some maths questions that are partly what we've been studying recently and partly just general revision. They do that on a Thursday night. They bring that in on Friday, and in Friday's lesson, we go through all those questions and we make sure the kids understand what's happening in those bits of maths. And we in general try and push their flexibility a bit to make sure they can answer questions that aren't just the ones in front of them, but are around that topic a little bit. They go away over the weekend and they do a very similar version, really almost identical version of that same homework, with the numbers just changed slightly or the question just changed ever so slightly, but it's almost the same questions, so they should be able to do it without help because we've gone through it on Friday. Then they come in on a Monday morning and they will sit a quiz, which is again a very similar version of the same questions. Now, the extent to which it's similar depends a bit on how old the kids are and their ability. A year 7 pupil who is lower ability, their quiz is going to be almost identical to the homework they did. If you have a year 11 pupil who's high ability, it might be really quite different, but on the same topics. Now, the main piece of marking we do is that we'll take that quiz and we'll go away and we'll mark that in detail, and we produce scores for the pupils, and that's a way of holding them to account on doing their homework properly, and also it's just such good practice for the kids, constant mini assessments. So they get really used to the idea of, you've got that piece of paper in front of you, you need to know some maths, get it down on paper in a way that, it is sort of exam style. We will, if we have time, and I would say this is not mission critical, but we will look through their homeworks that they've done. But the really mission critical bit of marking that we do is that quiz.
Got it. That was very well summarised. I think, Danny took about an hour and 40 minutes to tell me that. So that was really good, Charles. That's amazing stuff.